This program is brought to you in part by Cedar Ridge Paving and Milling, commercial and residential work. Yes, welcome to Racing Action Today talk series. And today we have a very special guest. We're going to talk today about restoring and collecting antique tractors. And of course, there's only one man that I know that knows all about tractors, Mr. Dave Alkas from the Berlin Lions Club, and a very active person when it comes to collecting tractors, right, Dave?
That's right. That's right, Larry.
You've been doing this a while, huh?
Well, I hate to tell you my age, but I've been well over 80 years. And
Wow.
I worked on a farm and worked with heavy equipment and located a lot of tractors in my running around with on the road. I was a heavy equipment mechanic for H.O. Penn, and so we did find a lot of the tractors, and my heritage was a lot with the farm I worked with across the street from me.
Now, if memory serves me correct, your favorite tractors are John Deere's and the two-cylinder John Deere's.
Yes, right.
Am I thinking right?
You're right, Larry. The tractors that I call, they usually, they call them a coffin block, whether it's a John Deere A, and not all the John Deere's were coffin block. They had vertical engines when you come out with the M's and the MTs.
Oh, wow.
But the coffin blocks were humongous. They went from the A's, the B's, all the way up through the G's, which one of the biggest tractors in the days that they had in the 50s. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them were sought after the years, and especially out west, and we're bringing big bucks there for a lot of them. I know I got a 720 that came out of Wisconsin, and that was used in the wheat fields out there.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I also bought one out of Yuma, Arizona, which was an 820, which is a mate to that, which is the same thing. It was a 58, but it was the biggest tractor that they made.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some pictures of some green tractors of John Deere's. I believe a different, the bigger ones and the smaller ones. Now, that 820s, that's the big tractor,
That
right?
was the biggest tractor in 1958 that John Deere had.
Yeah.
This one here, we found it out in a grapefruit orchard out in, actually it wasn't Yuma, it was Phoenix, Arizona. And this thing had 12-foot multiple disc harrows on the back and all kinds of hydraulics on it. Wow. And wheel weights, unbelievable, like 6 wheel weights in the rear on each side.
Now, you brought this thing back home?
I bought it from the fellow because he said he had a, excuse me, a good offer. And I was always sought after one. And around here, you can't find them without being reasonable. Most of the ones in Connecticut didn't have too many of the bigger ones like that. So I did find that one. I knocked on the door, and the guy said, yeah. He said, guy gave me, offered me a lot of money for it. And I said to him, well, what was a lot of money? And he told me like $3,000. And I said, geez, that's not bad, Yeah. I said, but would you be willing to sell it? And I said, I'll give you a little bit more, So I gave him $3,500 for it.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, okay. And I started it up. We ran it around the block. All the gears worked good, brakes and everything. And so I made arrangements. I went and got a bank check, paid him, and then I had a friend of mine that lived in Fountain Hills that he said, Dave, I'll bring it over my place over there until you get somebody. And I got Keene Construction out of Pennsylvania to come in, and he had an insured load and brought it into H.O. Penn for me, and I drove it to my house because it was big, yeah.
Wow.
That was the biggest tractor. I like that. I like the 722. We did them over.
Now, when it comes to collecting and restoring, Dave, you should always try to pick a tractor for beginners of what they like, right?
Yes, well,
because they came different ways, right?
Well, the thing of it is, Larry, a lot of the people that want to go and restore a tractor, most of them isn't just some person that was in the city or anything like that. Their heritage had to be from a farm. And either their father or their uncle had a farm and they sold it off to development.
Yeah.
And they remembered a certain tractor that they did have back when they were kids, either working on the farm, raking hay or whatever they had to do. And when they got a little older, they realized that their uncle or their father passed away, and if they had the area to keep it and restore it, and they're able to restore it, most of them had to be mechanically inclined.
Yeah.
With the labor rate nowadays, most people can't spend well over $100 an hour. I'm just using that as a shot, but
Yeah, you really need to do research and really learn yourself what to do mechanically.
That's right. That's right, Larry. If you can't do that, you're in most of the time, you wanna know what the tractor is worth. Of course, if you're restoring one for family, they really don't look at the total cost. I had families that I've done a couple over. I did a Farmall Cub over, and realistically, totally restored and everything, you probably could get $2,500 or $3,000 for it.
Yeah.
But we had $3,000 in this, and they said, no, I use this for parades and take the kids for a ride and a little cart behind it and all. And they didn't mind doing it.
You know, in reality, Dave, collecting tractors not like cars. I mean, cars, the price could be horrendous.
Yeah.
Tractors usually are not that way.
No, tractors, when you're going to look for a tractor, nowadays, most of the time is you got to look at the tires on them, because any one of the tractors, if they're a sizable tractor, you could pay $750 or $800 for one rear tire, not including the tubes that go with it. The tubes are probably another 75 bucks. And if you got to put two of them on the back of a tractor, you've already got 1,500 bucks in it. And most of the time, the older tractors, they weren't worth more than $2,000, $2,500. So you know where you're at when you first start out. So you've got to know what your limitations are. Secondly, you don't want to restore one and leave it outside. You got to have a facility where you can keep it after you restore it.
And oddly enough, lately, I see more lawn tractors, not lawn tractors in general. I mean, big tractors sitting on someone's lawn.
Yes, they
like show them.
You're right, Larry.
You're seeing that more and more, Dave.
Yeah. Well, back here, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I remember when they used to have the old Fortunes, some of the little farmers and stuff, they sold off the farm and they still had the old house or anything. They'd drag an old steel wheel Fortune up and put it on the lawn and rusted and whatever, and they had them and they looked nice, But then when we had a shortage of steel back there, they were paying atrocious money for scrap iron. They'd walk up to the door and offer them $750 or $800 for something that they thought wasn't worth anything. So a lot of them went down the tubes because of that.
Yeah, and of course, there's other, besides John Deere, I think maybe, would you say Farmall is the second most sought after?
Yes, out west, John Deere's a lot, but they've got a lot of competition with a lot of your foreign tractors nowadays.
Yeah.
And let me start straight. I'm not strictly a John Deere man right now. I mean, I do restore a lot of Farmalls, and I have a lot of Farmalls that I have in my museum down at Fairgrounds.
Yes.
And down there we house, and we're not prejudiced. We got Minneapolis Moldings in there.
Oddly enough, one of my favorite tractors is a Farmall Cub with the white front end.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, don't ask me why.
Cultivision.
Yeah.
This little model up here, that's a Farmall A, and it's a little bit bigger than a Cub.
Yeah.
But we've done them over, and we had people donate them to me, a Super A with hydraulics. The difference was it didn't have hydraulics, it was an A, and if it had hydraulics on it, which was a lot better implement tractor, and they were called a Super A.
Yeah.
And had a little extras on them. Yeah.
Yeah, we have some pictures, I believe, of the red tractors, the Farmalls.
Yeah.
And one interesting picture we have is before and after.
Oh, yeah.
We've shown before it was done up, painted, and then after. I would like them to show the people, you know.
Yeah, yes.
'Cause
I turned around and it's the same thing. Just recently, I restored a TO30, which is a Ferguson tractor.
Yep.
And this really was a tough unit to do, but we wound up putting rubber on the front. Thank goodness the rear tires are all right. And we wound up putting the work in it, and the people couldn't believe it. The engine was seized up. I had pulled the head off, free it up, free everything up. The lifters were stuck in it. I mean, this fella that had it before actually was a mechanic farmer.
Yep.
But the things that he overlooked, it's like any farmer. Back then, if they had baling twine or a fence of wire or copper tubing that they had left over from plumbing or something, they'd use that for their exhaust system and stuff there. They would not spend too much on that vehicle.
No. You know, oddly enough, Dave, the tractor you're talking about has got an interesting history. If I'm not mistaken, didn't this tractor get involved selling the string beans that are sold today in the supermarket?
Okay, the one you're talking about, that's not the one, but this one here was the duplicate to this tractor right here.
Oh, really?
It's a Farmall Super A. And the Powers family donated, and you did a lot of work over in Collins Bean Factory in Rocky Hill over there. They do a lot of beans and stuff. And they have a lot of John Deeres and the older ones that do a lot of the work there. Of course, they got modern equipment. They got high-rise tractors with the high lift front ends and rear. They're high croppers, they call them. And they come up, and I took that one down and did minimum amount of work. Rebuilt the carburetor and did put a new battery in it and points and condenser in it. And God, I ran it, and it looked so good that I didn't even bother painting it.
Yeah,
because it looked so. We used it in the parade.
You know, in today's scheme of things, patina is special.
You're right. You're right.
You know, they're not. You know, everybody is not going to take a tractor down to bare metal and repaint it. That is no longer the normal thing to do.
Long as you can read the letters on it, and the paint is weathered according to the years it had. You know, if you had one that was weathered out and you still read the letters and the model and everything, leave it alone. You know, you don't want to start messing with it.
No. Now, when people, Dave, say that they say, you know, I think we're going to restore a tractor, they're going to start looking to find one. But there's a sequence of things. Once you get it, most of the tractors aren't running when you get them.
Oh, no, Larry,
so
no.
Now there's sequence you're going to go through. So but start, I don't know if it's with the gas tank or the electrical. Where do you think this starts?
That comes along with the whole restoration. But the first thing you want to do is find out how much the vehicle they want for it to begin with. If it's an atrocious price, you're gonna, you can't really get too involved in it. Then you got to take a look at the tires, the rear rims, whether they had calcium in them and they're rotted out. You start buying rims for them and tires for it. That's one of the biggest issues that they have nowadays. We used to buy rear tires for big tires, that is, 38-inch, 11, 12-inch, 38s for $350. And like I mentioned before, they're getting $750, $800 for them. And this isn't a 4-ply or a heavy 6-ply tire or anything, you know. And some of the tires are getting a little hard to get. They reproduce them, but you still got to pay for them.
Now, while we're on the subject, there was a period of time, Dave, the tractors didn't have rubber tires.
Yes.
And there was a reason why they didn't, right?
Well, what they did back then, a lot of them in the 30s, just pre-war, when the war started up in the 40s, they wound up, all the rubber went for military use. They had to have them for the Army and the military. So anyone that had them would order a tractor, and they would come through with steel wheels. later on, after the wars were over in 47, 48, they turned around and they did what you call a cutoff on them. They would take the old rear rim, and they offered a lot of your warehouses and supply depots would offer rims the width that you wanted and the size you wanted,
Yep.
so that you cut the blanks off. You cut all your spokes out, and you fit this back in, tack it, and spin it, and make sure. Back then you weren't using a highway or nothing.
Yep.
So they were very close. I mean, they actually measured them to make sure they would run pretty true. And that's what they call cutoffs. And a lot of the old tractors that you find up to 30, almost 40 that is, they were cutoffs.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Dave, hold up that book to show people, you know, when they're buying parts, and there are places where you could get new parts for tractors.
Yes,
And of course, you go to the dealers too, right?
Yeah, this is only one. I mean, it's not the only one either. I mean, you got ag parts here
Yeah.
that I just showed you, and then we got Steiner here. And you can buy, if you want anything for any kind of tractor, whether it's a Minneapolis Moline, whether it's a Farmall,
Yeah.
whether it's Oliver or anything, you go to those books over there, and a lot of them you go to the internet and they'll tell you the books that you can get, and most of them will give you the books. They don't charge you for them or anything.
So Dave, after somebody had gotten the tractor, and so they're going to start restoring it. Number one, they need to get it running. Is that correct?
That's the first thing, Larry. That's the first thing you want to do is, if you get it, and before you even buy it, make sure it isn't frozen up. I mean frozen up so they reach in and turn the engine over.
So you should, just to get the people that really don't know what we're talking about, how would you tell if the motor's not seized? Do you have to grab the fan belt, or how do you do this? Or the crank?
Most of the time, if you put it in one of the higher gears that you have, like if it's a John Deere, the older style, you could put it in 5th or 6th gear and rock it back and forth a little bit, and you just watch the fan will either turn back and forth. If it don't, I mean, most of the time you wound up that the engine has been seized up.
Okay.
Now you're talking, you have to pull the head off, free up the pistons, and if the pistons, you're going to need
and
rings.
they still could be fixed.
It can be. I've done a lot of them that I've had to pull the block out and rebore it and everything else.
So once you discover it's not seized, I mean, do you look like for the fuel system first, or the electrical system, or spark plugs, or where do you start?
First thing you want to do is crank it over. Put a battery, or if not, a lot of the older John Deeres were flywheel start on the side. And that could tell you it's not frozen to begin with without even rocking it. You know, if you can turn the flywheel back and forth, it's not frozen up. They have compression release on the side of where the spark plugs are, where you can open them up and relieve the compression to turn them over when you go to start them. But first thing you would do is get your, see if you got spark. Take a spark plug and put it down there and unhook one of the wires. And make sure you ground the spark plug out, because you got out in midair, you ain't got to ground. Put it there and take and crank it over slow, and make sure you cycle through, because like a 2-cylinder, you got to go almost 180 degrees to get to the opposite side. So they're 2-cylinder. If you haven't got spark, now you got to go to your distributor or magneto. A lot of times you can clean the points up. And a little secret that I found out, that a couple of the old timers, I mean, I had a lot of little things that I mentioned to people, and they say, oh my God, you know, I never thought of that. They take and they file the points, and when they do that, they take the cadmium plating off them, and it's hard to get an arc again with them.
Oh, wow.
So what they do is, if you reach into your coin collections with the pennies, find the oldest penny that you got, and don't have the battery hooked up or anything, but open the points up, put it in there, and make sure you hold pressure against it and rub that penny through, and it'll copper coat it. And 9 out of 10 times you won't have any problem with getting a spark.
Ooh, wow.
It's a little something that, you know, a lot of
Okay,
people,
so-
and that could go with anything, cars, anything.
So now you got a spark, right? Now,
Yeah,
now
right.
what's the next move?
Well, the second move is you look into the tank first and find out if someone had left some of the ethanol gas in there. And 9 out of 10 times you can luck out, because most of these older tractors, something, you know, below the 30 years old, 35, 40 years old, they had shut-off valves under the tank. And 9 out of 10 times they always leaked. So if somebody left the tractor, the tank would leak out completely and it would work out beautiful. But if it didn't, you would wind up having a varnish in there. And you go down to the carburation, you disconnect the line, and you're not going to get any gas through there. So you'll want to turn around and disconnect the line going to it, and probably remove the carburetor and get a kit for the carburetor. Pull it apart, make sure the float ain't stuck, and clean it all up and all. You might have somebody professional do that if you have to, but
So
if not,
rebuilding a carburetor is an important
it's
thing.
an important. So if you got spark in your carburation, put a set of plugs in it, or clean the plugs that are in it and crank it over. You should. Another one is, while you got the plugs out, do a compression check and make sure you got compression. If you got a compression on the right side and the left side, that means your valves aren't stuck.
Now, compression-wise, should they be equal on the same side?
Well, no, they don't have to be equal. I mean, they could vary 10, 15 pounds or 20 pounds. Usually after you get it running, when you first start, you'll be on the low side until the oil gets up around the rings. And you take and run it and drain the oil. You want to make sure you got oil in it and you got oil pressure. When you first start that tractor that you've inherited or bought, has oil pressure immediately, because a lot of times sitting around, there might be water down in the crankcase, and it sat outside when it was cold and someone turned it
You
over.
got to check for it,
and
make
they
sure
sheared
there's
the
oil.
shaft off.
There's oil and no water in it.
No oil and no water. And a lot of times, if you suspect that the tractor has been outside any time, go down underneath and take the drain for the oil plug out and back it off till you're almost dropping it out. Put a pan under it, and the first thing that comes out of there is either antifreeze, if the block is leaking by, a head gasket or so, or water that's getting in through the intake
So
or
that's
so.
the first thing that'll leak.
That kind of shakes it, because the water will always settle to the bottom.
Oh, wow.
And in the wintertime, a lot of these tractors, you can't move them because the water is setting in the rear axles, the housings for their gear drives and all, and they'll freeze up. You put them in a heated room and all, now you can move them.
Now, let me ask you another question that just come to my mind. Is there a special gas you need to use?
No, most of that gas.
Any gas you buy today?
You can use any regular. I myself use high-test gas, so it'll last a lot longer than the regular standard gas, the higher octane.
Yeah.
If you ever want to leave them for a long period of time, they say use racing fuel, Cam 2 racing, which is very, very expensive. You're talking $8.59 a gallon.
And now, what's the additive they use today?
Most of the time I don't believe in
Alcohol,
additives.
or what do you call it?
I use Marble Mystery Oil,
Yeah.
which is an old timers. I think back in the 30s they used that. They used to have an overhead oil injector out of Marble Mystery Oil.
Yeah.
And it's a really highly refined oil. I put it right in the gas. It don't smoke or anything like that. And with the older tractors, all the valves are they don't have the Stellite valves.
Now, also, while you're talking about Marble Mystery Oil, do you tend to put some in the cylinder where the spark plug was, just to make sure everything's loose in there?
If you know the tractor and the history, and it's been setting for any period of time, whether it's 2 cylinders or 4, the 2 cylinders is kind of hard to get them because they're horizontal engines. You could squirt it in with a good oil squirter and whirl it back and forth and get some around it. The 4 cylinders are upright. The vertical engines, take the plugs out and shoot some in there. Don't make any difference, but fill them cylinders. You don't have to fill them up, but put a sizable amount in each one of them and let it work its way in.
Now, these tractors, Are they overhead valve, some of them?
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The early ones weren't. The Ford 8 ends they were a flathead. They were calling them an L head.
Yeah.
And then you got into this TO 20 or 30. They were an overhead engine. That was a Z129 Continental engine. And that was a very popular engine in all those units, yep.
And you know, Dave, are my favorite subjects. In the old days, when people didn't have money, they didn't have enough money to buy a tractor. They used the Model A and cut it down.
Oh, yes.
And they called them doodle bugs.
Yeah, doodle bugs, yeah.
Right?
Yep. I'll get into that in another show, but yeah, there's a little history behind them, too.
Yeah, special. Very special.
Yeah.
And I have to say, Dave, you know, talking about these tractors is so interesting because of the history involved with what went on in the early days.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
They had to do what they had, you know.
You did what you had to do, and of course the war had would create
that was,
trouble.
it was
And it was
a deterrent in between, yeah.
absolutely.
But,
well,
yep.
Dave, when you're having fun, time flies.
That's
we're
for
gonna
sure.
have to call it a night tonight,
Okay.
and we're gonna have to resume the show at another time to talk more about it. But
right.
as usual, buddy, you're on your game.
Thank you, Larry.
I really want to thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Being with us. I want to thank you, the viewers, for being here. And if you ever have a need to want to collect a tractor, Dave is always at that Berlin Fairgrounds.
Yep.
And believe me, he loves to talk. Huh, Dave?
That's for sure.
Okay. I want to
Thank
thank you and good night. This program is brought to you in part by Just Results Weight Loss Center in Berlin, Connecticut.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and prime steaks for 40 years. Experience one of our 3 unique dining room settings, 2 with fireplaces, or relax in our cozy pub with a craft beer, wine by the glass, or specialty cocktail while enjoying a meal from our new lighter fare pub menu. Serving lunch and dinner Tuesday through Sunday. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42. Gift cards always available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of routes 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.